So this summer, I worked with Middle Georgia's Center for Academic Excellence's Upward Bound program as a peer advisor. And during the week of June 18th through June 22nd, I had the opportunity of teaching during Technology Week. Coming from a background of somewhat amateurish photography experience, I decided to teach my ninth grade group of students some of the basics of photography. The week went by pretty fast, and I really enjoyed teaching this group of students, being that it was my first time teaching overall. Some of the stuff I decided to teach my group of kids was the 7 key elements of photography and some of the top genres of photography. Since I really enjoyed teaching in the classroom, I decided to bring my knowledge over to YouTube. Prior to that Monday during Technology Week, I sat long wondering what I would teach, how I would teach it, and what would be the purpose of it. So, I finally came around to the subject of photography. Since it's one of my passions, I decided to share it. I came up with a creative PowerPoint that showcased the basic elements of photography and created a worksheet that followed along with the presentation. Photography 101 is what I titled that presentation. The art or process of producing images by action of radiant energy, especially light on a sensitive surface, is known as photography, according to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary. With the knowledge I previously learned from my digital imaging class at my current university, and with a little help from Google, I discovered the 7 key elements of photography. To fully understand the art of photography, it is said that we must practice these key elements: composition, light, depth, line, texture, pattern and shape, and vantage point. These are all key elements of photography. So, during this section of my video, it'll simply be a rundown of words and definitions. Defining these key elements in the simplest way possible is what helped me understand the words and memorize them, and what helped me to pass them along. Composition is the arrangement of objects in the photograph. Light must be understood by levels and angles. Depth is created using focus, framing, and angles. Lines are the outlines of subjects in a photograph. Texture is a property of a photograph that inspires a sense of tactility in the observer. I like to think of texture is basically a photograph that makes you want to reach out and touch the image. So, say for instance, like a really sharp picture of like an alligator tail, or something like a parakeet, like the fur, the texture, it makes you want to reach and touch the photograph. Patterns have 3 important aspects. Those are rhythm, symmetry, and triangles. Shapes are defined by contrast of different light or color areas. And finally, we have vantage point, which is basically the position which the photograph was taken. On the next day, we learned some of the top genres of photography. Just like before, I simplified the definitions of each of these genres so it'll be easier for my group of students to learn. The top genres we learned about are aerial, architectural, candid, documentary, fashion, food, landscape, night-long exposure, portraiture, sport, street, war, and wildlife photography. Aerial photography are photos taken from above. If you search the Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta on Google, you will find like one of the perfect examples of what aerial photography is. Basically, like any photograph taken from a high level pointing down on something, that's aerial photography. Architectural photography is photos of interesting buildings and built structure. So any photo of buildings, any photos of monuments or bridges or furniture, those are known as architectural photography. Candid photography are photos taken spontaneously as they happen. So basically, what I told my kids is that any photos that the paparazzi take of celebrities, like leaving restaurants, leaving out of hotels, getting out of their car, those are examples of candid photography. Documentary photography are photos that form a photo story. I like to think of this genre as storytelling pictures, like those of the late great Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, John F. Kennedy, and more. I told my kids that fashion photography is typically used to sell something. Food photography is just what it sounds like, It's pleasing photos of food, whether it's from your local restaurant ad or if it's just food at your dinner table. Whatever you share that's a picture of food, that's food photography. Landscape photography is photos portraying a scenery and show impact of environmental change. Night-long exposure is capturing the world at night. That's basically the photos you see of moving cars on the street at nighttime. That's night-long exposure. Portraiture is photos capturing moods and expressions of people. So basically those up-close shots of subjects that show whether they're smiling, they're mugging, they're happy, sad. You can see their moods and expression using portraiture photography. Sport photography is getting up close to the action in a fast-paced and action-packed setting. Street photography is sort of like candid photography, but with street photography, they capture everyday life in public spaces as they happen. So I could be walking down a downtown street in my hometown and see somebody playing the guitar on the side of the road and snap a picture of them. That would be an example of street photography. War photography is another one like food photography. It sounds just as it is. It is basically capturing photos of conflict in war-torn areas. And finally, we have wildlife photography. This photography is photos that capture animals in their natural habitats. To sum up my week of teaching during this summer, I would say that it was a great experience. I've learned even more about photography in this 1 week by expanding my mind and letting others know about it. If I was asked to do it all over again, I definitely would.